Have you ever made a New Year's resolution and then quit it halfway through the year? But not because it was too hard or because you gave up, but just because on further reflection, it really just wasn't right for you anymore. Hey, my name's Esp. In my spare time, I make video games. It's been almost a year and a half since my last video, but today I am here to break that streak. In January of 2024, I made a resolution for myself. I wanted to stop dinking around and halfway finishing projects. I wanted to buckle down and put a game on Steam by the end of the year, and post a devlog every month about my progress. I wasn't hoping for the game to be any kind of a financial success. I do have a day job, and I'm not real confident in my ability to make game dev be my full-time thing anytime soon. I just wanted the experience of releasing a game, and I wanted to prove to myself that I'm capable of finishing something. After some consideration, I settled on the idea that became Card Crawler. It wasn't my dream game, but it was something that I thought I could do in a year. If you didn't see any of the devlogs at the time, Card Crawler is basically Enter the Gungeon meets Slay the Spire. Top-down dungeon crawling with a load of different weapons and abilities to collect and use against a variety of enemies, except instead of guns, it's a deck of cards. Instead of reloading, you shuffle and draw a new hand, collect cards, build a deck, fight your way through several layers of themed enemies and bosses. It's a pretty good time. I started out the year well enough, making consistent progress on the game and uploading monthly devlogs tracking that progress, so what happened? I do want to talk about that, but I thought it might be more interesting at the close of the year to talk about some of the other stuff I've done this year. I try to participate in game jams every few months just to mix things up, and while I do usually upload shorts about my game jams, in what I jokingly refer to as talking fast about a game I made quickly, I thought it might be fun to take the opportunity to talk about a few of these games at a more reasonable pace. Conveniently though, it occurred to me that 3 of these games in particular were pretty influential on the direction that I've taken Card Crawler, so we're gonna do both. And hopefully it provides enough varied gameplay footage to keep you entertained for the next several minutes. Here's hoping. A famous painter once said, "Good artists copy, great artists steal." Think of your favorite game and how you describe it to someone who hasn't seen it. Odds are, at some point, you're going to describe that game by comparing it to another. It's like poker, but you can modify it and replace the cards in your deck. It's like that old Flash game Motherload, except you have to defend your surface base during the day. I challenge you to find a game that is not somehow inspired by something else. You won't find one. And I feel like this is doubly true in a game jam, where you just don't have a lot of time to come up with something entirely original. And it's super helpful to have a template to follow so you can instead focus your efforts on the execution, and then just add some little variation or twist to make it your own. While that doesn't mean it's okay to steal someone's assets or blatantly rip off an entire game, it does mean that as long as you can take it in your own direction to some extent, and you don't use any assets without permission, using someone else's work as a template is a really, really good place to start, especially when you're learning. Relevant to that point, MCC, or MC Championship, is a team-based gaming competition which is held several times a year. It consists of teams of 4 playing a series of minigames built entirely in Minecraft. It's a good time whether or not you're into Minecraft itself. Minecraft is basically just being used as a game engine at this point. The developers have added custom sounds and textures and models to really flesh out the games, and the organizers do a great job of building a fun experience. One of my favorite events in MCC is a game called Sands of Time. Each team is placed in a copy of the same dungeon and tasked with retrieving as much gold as possible within a time limit by fighting monsters, solving puzzles, and completing platforming sections. In the first room of the dungeon, there's a massive hourglass. If it runs out of sand, you're trapped forever and don't get any points. Fortunately, you can also collect sand to extend the timer and buy yourself more time to collect loot. The teamwork's good, the level design is fun, and the tensions are high. Like I said, good game devs create, great game devs steal. I've wanted to take a crack at this idea for a long time now, and I finally took the opportunity for this jam. The theme was 1 minute, so of course the hourglass in the first room gives you exactly 1 minute to loot gold from the dungeon. Along the way you collect time sprites, little fairies that you can use to pause the hourglass and effectively buy yourself more time. I wanted to try a game with guns and hit scan projectiles since I've never done that before. I know that hit scan weapons are generally regarded as inferior, but I've never done them before. And I thought within the time constraints of a jam, a simplification might not hurt. So I sort of went for an almost Indiana Jones style character with a revolver, which can be used to fight off the mummies that you find in the tomb. The best loot is hidden behind puzzle doors with a few different puzzles that you have to solve to get in. Overall, I'm really happy with how this game turned out. I think it's pretty fun to play, and it has a decently high skill ceiling, as you really need a good sense of direction and a good sense of time to be able to find your way back to the hourglass with more sprites before your precious time runs out. I definitely would have preferred to have a bit more variety in the door puzzles, but for what it is, it's pretty good. The art came out pretty well, and while the sound effects are not particularly special, I did make them all by myself, mostly by going to the garage with a microphone and dropping random things on the floor until something sounded right. The judges didn't really seem to like my reloading mechanic, where you have to manually insert the bullets one at a time. They complained that this wasn't the correct kind of game for it, which I disagree with, but that's probably a failure on my part to communicate what kind of game I wanted to make. This wasn't intended to be a fast-paced run-and-gun game, but a careful time management game. With that in mind, I wanted reloading to be intentionally time-consuming, as it adds a time cost to combat. Running past the enemies is a lot riskier, but it means that you don't have to take the time to reload, and time is your single most valuable asset. Personally, my biggest takeaway from this game, though, was how much fun it is, especially as a solo developer, and at least for me, to confine myself to a quick, easily repeatable game loop. I really enjoy making games that you can sit down and play for a half hour at a time, pick up for a quick run, and then go do something else. My project Card Crawler was rapidly becoming not that. Although none of it really made it into the devlogs, or really into the game itself for that matter, I had in my head a whole story, with characters and lore and drama and everything. The problem is that none of that is what I enjoy about making games. Making video games can be broken down into so many different pieces, and some of those pieces are going to appeal more or less to different people. I realized that I was trying to build out a story for the game because I felt like it was expected of me, but I really didn't want to, and I didn't enjoy it, and I wasn't good at it, and to make matters worse, it was beginning to get in the way of the parts that I do enjoy. I couldn't add certain enemies I wanted because they didn't fit in with the theme. I had to focus on characters and environments and lore when I would rather have focused on gameplay. It was also pushing the game to become increasingly more and more art-heavy, which is another part I don't love as much, and that was rapidly turning into burnout. And then, to make matters worse, in October of 2024, I suddenly and without warning was laid off from my day job. It was a good thing in the long run. I'd been looking for other opportunities already, and I quickly landed a new job, which started out something like this. Hey, welcome to the team. We're glad to have you here. This is your coworker. He's going to be bringing you on board, bringing you up to speed on everything that you need to do. Also, and this is just one last little thing, but he's decided that he wants to leave the company. We managed to work out a deal where he'll stay on for a few months and bring you up to speed on everything he's done for the last 10 years. So you better pay attention, because when he's gone, it's all on you, buddy. Anyway, really is great to have you. For a few months, I really just didn't have much spare mental bandwidth for game development after work. I was pretty tired every day, and once family obligations were done, I mostly just played games or went to bed. And I was just starting to get on top of that when suddenly... Yeah. Factorio went and dropped a really awesome DLC, and I sort of blacked out for a few months trying to get my perfect 100% achievements back. Whoops. At least it was fun. And that pretty much finished out the year. My videos stopped in July or August, and development on the game stopped pretty much completely at about the same time. I was burnt out and stressed. I didn't really enjoy the game, and I didn't enjoy making it. I had fully given up on my New Year's resolution. The seed had been planted, though. I knew that I wanted to make something more gameplay focused. Someday, I might have a teammate who loves to do lore and story, and then I can focus on gameplay and programming, but in the meantime, the answer is not to try to do those things myself. The answer is just to design a game that's good without needing as much of those things. Lean into my strengths and minimize my weaknesses. I had an idea. What if Card Crawler had more emphasis on quick, fast-paced rounds? Instead of picking a room from a map and waiting for waves of enemies to spawn, then picking another room, you just spawn in a large dungeon full of monsters and loot. You move from one room to another at your own pace, which makes the game feel faster overall. I simplified a lot of systems, combining things together and streamlining things a lot. I shifted all the art to be fully top-down, which means I don't have to spend nearly as much time on art and animations. And finally, bear with me now, I added multiplayer. Now, I know that any of you with experience programming or making games is yelling at your screen right now. I just finished explaining how I decided that the game I was making was too much and needed to be cut back, and now I'm adding multiplayer? Multiplayer is famously so much extra work that there are memes about it. Programming a multiplayer game is like trying to solve a puzzle with your friend over the phone. Think for a minute about how that would work, and you'll maybe begin to appreciate what it means to add multiplayer to a game. I have no misconceptions here. I fully accept that multiplayer will single-handedly double the time that it takes to finish this game, maybe even more than that. But think back to what I've been saying. Minimize my weaknesses, lean into my strengths. In my day job, I work as essentially a robotics engineer. Solving complex code problems is my bread and butter. I make a living by figuring out how to keep several distinct systems in sync. If anything, game dev is simpler than this because no one dies if I get it wrong, which is frankly a nice change of pace. And just like coding is my favorite part of game development, playing with other people is my favorite part of playing games. It's a win all around, it adds a ton of appeal to my game, and the challenges that it adds are the sort that I actually enjoy solving. And as it turns out, you can try all you want to convince me that it was the wrong choice, but joke's on you, I already did it, and it was 100% the right decision. Being able to playtest in a group has done wonders for my player retention. Emergent gameplay happens much more naturally when you have other real-life people in the game. And even at this early stage, watching a group of people enjoy something that I've made together is genuinely some of the most fun that I've ever had making games. The newly reborn project took on the name Wizard Dungeon, and it's the game I've been working on ever since. So yeah, make small games, but make games that you want to play, and games that play to your strengths. Who'd have thought? For this game, I was once again pretty heavily inspired by another game. When I read the theme, I immediately thought about the game Inscription, specifically the first act. Inscription is a roguelike deck-building game where you play against a mysterious captor who takes on the role of progressively harder and harder enemies, almost like a dungeon master in D&D. As you defeat your opponent's cards and deal damage directly to him, that damage is tracked by placing human teeth on a scale. Once the scale tips far enough one way or the other, the round ends and you either progress or are defeated, depending on which way it tipped. There's an item you can pick up as you play that will allow you to remove one of your own teeth and place it on the scale, which can be useful to tip a difficult enemy over the edge, or to save yourself from an impending loss. The game does a really good job at portraying this, and as someone who's had some dental problems in the past, this scene probably gets to me more than it should, but at any rate, it got me thinking. What if I make a game that starts out simple, but over time the player is forced to make sacrifices to progress? Sometimes you'll be able to get away with just giving up a piece of equipment, but other times you'll be forced to make a harder sacrifice, like an eye, which will shorten your vision range, or your toe, which will reduce your movement speed. Some of my favorite ones are sacrificing your finger, which makes all your shots pull to one side or the other, as if you can't quite hold the gun right. Your memory, which makes on-screen ammo display useless, as if you just can't remember how many shots you fired, or your sanity, which makes extra zombies appear on screen that aren't actually there. I was really happy with how this game turned out. When I make games for jams, I pretty much always do all my own art. I've found that it's easier just to grit my teeth and do it rather than try to modify any existing art to fit my needs, or to sift through asset packs to find something that works for what I want to make. But I almost always end up using free sound effects and music. For this game, while it's nothing fancy, I made everything myself, and I'm super proud of how it turned out. I feel like the gameplay's fun and interesting and reasonably well balanced, the game is pretty bug-free, and at least for a 10 to 15 minute playthrough, I feel like it's pretty compelling. And there's enough variety that most people that I had test the game were interested in playing at least once or twice. For the art in particular, though, I tried something. While pretty much every game I've ever made relied on 2D pixel art, I've never really done much with lighting. Going back to my point before, I wondered if I could make use of lighting effects like shadows and normal maps to get more out of my art. In other words, use my proficiency in programming and the features of my engine to make up for deficiencies in my own abilities. And I think it worked pretty well. After the jam ended, I did some proof of concept work to see how Wizard Dungeon would look with the same style, and I was really pleased with the result. Long ago, the four nations lived together in harmony, but then everything changed when the Fire Nation attacked. I absolutely love the game Kirby Air Ride for Nintendo GameCube. particularly the city trial part of the game, which is the best part of the game. It's just good. Maybe I'll talk about that more in another video at some point, but at any rate, I wanted to try out that idea. In the limited time I had, I didn't want to spend too much time figuring out how to emulate the floaty dynamic driving of Kirby Air Ride, so I set out with the plan to just borrow the driving and control scheme of Rock and Roll Racing, hence the name. This was a super casual jam that my brothers and I organized, so I allowed myself to just reuse my driving controller from an earlier game jam I had done, and started to set up kind of a dark, dirty, cyberpunk-style city. I wrote in the ability to get out and switch cars. I even had some kind of janky multiplayer in, but I started to run into issues with the 2D lighting system in my engine. It turns out that when I had too many lights on screen, some of them started to get disabled or cut out. Doing some research, I found that my game engine has a hard-coded limit of like 16 lights on screen, which is a problem if I'm planning to make a game where everything has lights and shadows to cover up my art. This was enough of a rabbit hole that I didn't end up finishing the game jam, but it was a fun concept I wouldn't mind revisiting later. I have some fun ideas for driving games at some point. Oh, to have enough time to pursue all my random ideas, am I right? So now I'm in trouble. I could potentially recompile the engine myself and raise the limit, but I figure it's probably there for a good reason, right? It'd be a shame to jump through all those hoops just to find that my new game now doesn't run well enough to be worth playing. I don't think that's how I want to go. So instead, I did something dumb. I remade the entire game in 3D. Yeah. It took almost a month and a half to remake everything, and I don't mean 2D sprites in a 3D world. I mean I learned new programs for this. And guess what? I like it. I did take some CAD classes in school, and I've been designing parts for 3D printing for years, so I guess it wasn't totally unexpected. But more than that, 3D animating, as it turns out, at least for me, is a lot less work than 2D. In 2D, to add an animation for a character, you have to draw several frames of animation, then do that again for 3 to 8 different perspectives. You end up drawing the entire character like 30 to 40 times for even a relatively basic set of moves. Then on top of that, say you decide to make a tweak to the appearance of that character, you have to make that tweak 30 to 40 times. Woo! But in 3D, it's a different story. You model the character, you texture the character, you animate the character, you export the character. Want to make a tweak in the model? Go do it, and then just export again. Your animations don't care. Want a different color scheme on the same character? That's fine, just apply a different texture to the existing model. It solves my lighting problems, it solves problems I've had with previous projects trying to get things to render in the correct order. It's just been a good change for me all around. I'm not saying that it will be good for everyone, necessarily, but for me, it really, really has been. So, here we are. It's a very different game than I was working on a year and a half ago, but I'm enjoying working on it a lot more. I'm making faster progress, and I enjoy playing the game a lot more than I did before, even by myself. I also personally think that it looks a lot better, but I do know that's going to be a matter of taste. Let me know what you think. I do have a lot more than I want to talk about with the changes I've made mechanically to the game, but I feel like I've been talking for long enough, so I'll leave that for another video. Hopefully it'll be less than a year and a half from now, but I make exactly 0 promises. However long that takes though, until then, thanks for watching. I really do appreciate it.